a last judgment occurs when the church is at its end, and the church is at its end when there is no faith because there is no caring. There are many reasons why a last judgment occurs when the church is at its end. The main one is that when this happens, the equilibrium between heaven and hell begins to fail, and with that equilibrium goes our freedom, and once our freedom is gone, we can no longer be saved. We are then quite willingly carried away to hell, and, not being in a state of freedom, we cannot be led to heaven. This is because no one can be reformed without freedom, and all our freedom comes from the equilibrium between heaven and hell. 2 chapters from Heaven and Hell support this point, one dealing with the equilibrium between heaven and hell and one dealing with our being in a state of freedom because of this balance between heaven and hell. It also says there that without freedom no one can be reformed. We can conclude that the equilibrium between heaven and hell begins to fail when the church comes to an end from the fact that heaven and hell come from humankind, see the chapter on that subject above. And when there are few people entering heaven and many entering hell, the evil on the one side outstrips the good on the other, because the growth of hell entails a corresponding growth of evil. Everything evil within us comes from hell and everything good comes from heaven. Since evil is outstripping good as the church comes to an end, everyone is then judged by the Lord, the evil are separated from the good, and everything is put back into order, a new heaven is set up, and a new church on earth as well, and in this way equilibrium is restored. This, then, is what the term last judgment refers to. It will be described in more detail in later pages. It is common knowledge, based on the word, that a church comes to an end when there is no longer any faith within it. It is not yet widely known, however, that there is no faith if there is no caring. I will therefore need to say more about this just below. The Lord foretold that there would be no faith at the end of the church. When the Son of Humanity comes, will he find faith on the earth? Luke 18:8. He also foretold that there would be no love. At the close of the age, lawlessness will abound and the love of many will grow cold, and this gospel will be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. Matthew 24:12-14. The close of the age is the last time of the church. In this chapter in Matthew the Lord describes the steadily declining state of the church's love and faith, but the description is couched entirely in correspondences. So there is no way to understand what the Lord foretold there apart from a knowledge of the spiritual meaning that corresponds to the details of the chapter. That is why the Lord has made it possible for me to explain everything in that chapter, as well as some of the things that are said later about the close of the age, his coming, the successive stages of the devastation too of the church, and the last judgment, in Secrets of Heaven. Here I will take up the fact that there is no faith when there is no caring. People presume that faith continues to exist as long as there is belief in what the church teaches. So faith is present in people who believe. Simply believing, though, is not faith. Instead, faith is to will and to put into practice what we believe. When the teachings of the church are only believed, they are not embodied in our lives. They are present only in our memory and in the thinking of our outer selves. They do not come into our lives until they come into our will and from there into our actions. Then for the first time those teachings become part of our spirit, since our spirit, whose life is the life itself that is within us, is made up of our will, and of our thinking to the extent that this thinking issues from our will. Our memory and the thinking based on it is only a waiting room where teachings first gain entrance to us. It is all the same whether you say will or love, since we all love what we will and will what we love. Further, our will is the part of us that is receptive to love, and our understanding, whose function is thinking, is the part of us that is receptive to faith. We can know, think, and understand all kinds of things, but when we are left to ourselves and weigh things on the basis of our will and love, then we discard anything that does not agree with our will or love. We therefore discard such things after our bodily life as well, when we are living in the Spirit, since as just noted only what has entered into our will and love persists in our spirit. After death everything else seems alien to us, something that we throw out of the house and reject completely, because it is not consonant with our love. 3. It is quite another matter if we do not merely believe the teachings of the Church that are drawn from the Word but also will them and do them. Then our faith becomes real. Faith is a passion for truth that comes from wanting to do what truth teaches because it is the truth, and wanting to do what truth teaches because it is the truth is the very definition of human spirituality. That is, it transcends our earthly nature, which involves our wanting to do what truth teaches not because it is the truth but for the sake of praise, esteem, or profit for ourselves. Truth detached from such concerns is spiritual, because in its essence truth is divine. Consequently, willing truth because it is true is the same as acknowledging and loving what is divine. In fact, this willing and this acknowledging and loving are fully joined to each other and are also regarded as one in heaven. This is because the divinity that emanates from the Lord in heaven is the divine truth, and the people who are angels in heaven are the people who are receptive to that truth and make it part of their lives. I mention all this to make it clear that faith is not just believing but is willing and acting, therefore there is no faith if there is no caring. Caring, or love, is willing and acting. I have been shown that faith nowadays is so rare within the Church that you could call it non-existent. This was demonstrated by many individuals, scholars and commoners alike, whose spirits were examined after death to see what kind of faith they had had in the world. It turned out that all of them believed that faith was nothing more than believing and convincing themselves that something was true. The more learned among them believed that it was simply having a trust or assurance that they were saved by means of the Lord's suffering on the cross and His interceding for them. Hardly any of them realized that there is no faith if there is no caring or love. They did not even know what caring about one's neighbor is or what the difference is between thinking and willing. Most of them had gotten rid of caring, saying that caring does nothing for us, and that faith is all that is required. When they were told that caring and faith are one, just as willing and understanding are one, and that caring dwells in our will and faith in our understanding, and that separating one from the other was like separating our will from our understanding, they could not understand it. This told me that there is hardly any faith nowadays. They were shown this very convincingly as well. The ones who were utterly certain that they had faith were brought to an angelic community where there was real faith. As soon as communication was established, they clearly perceived that they themselves had no faith, and even admitted it publicly. The same thing was shown in other ways to the ones who professed faith and thought of themselves as believers but did not live according to faith, which means caring. One by one they admitted that they had no faith, because there was none of it in the life of their spirits. It was only on the outside, in some of the thinking they did while they were living in the physical world. That is what the state of the Church is like these days. There is no faith here because there is no caring, and where there is no caring there is nothing that is spiritually good, since the only spiritual good that can be done comes from caring. I have been told by a heavenly source that there is still some goodness among some people, but that it cannot be called spiritual goodness, only earthly goodness, because for them, real divine truths remain in darkness. It is divine truths that lead us to caring, teach us what it is, and focus us on it as the goal of our striving. So caring cannot arise except to the extent that there are truths to lead us there. The divine truths, though, on which the teachings of the various churches are based, focus only on faith, which is why they are called teachings of faith, and do not focus on life, and truths that focus solely on faith and not on life cannot make us spiritual. As long as they are on the outside of our lives, they are only earthly, they are learned and thought about only as something remote. That is why there is nothing spiritually good these days, only the earthly good that some people do. Further, every church is spiritual at first. That is, it begins with a focus on caring, but as time goes by it strays away from caring toward faith. As a result, from being an internal church it becomes a church that is merely external. Once it becomes a merely external church, it is at its end, since it then puts the whole stress on what we know and little or no emphasis on how we live. As we individuals in that church become external rather than internal, spiritual light is dimmed for us, even to the extent that we do not see divine truth on the basis of truth itself, that is, in heaven's light, since heaven's light is divine truth. We see it only in an earthly light, and when this is by itself and not illuminated by spiritual light, we are in effect looking at divine truth in the night. Then the only grounds we have for regarding it as true is the word of some ecclesiastical authority and its acceptance by the common crowd. As a result, our understanding cannot be enlightened by the Lord, since to the extent that earthly light shines brightly in our understanding, spiritual light is dimmed, and earthly light shines brightly in our understanding when we love worldly, bodily, and earthly things more than spiritual, heavenly, and divine ones. To the extent that this is the case, we are superficial individuals. The Christian world is unaware that where there is no caring there is no faith. It is unaware of what caring about one's neighbor is. It is not even aware that our will is what makes us who we really are, or that our thinking does so only to the extent that it draws on our willing. In order, therefore, to bring these matters into the light of understanding, I would like to append some references concerning them from Secrets of Heaven by way of illustration. From Secrets of Heaven. Faith. If people do not know that everything in the universe goes back to goodness and truth and that these two must be joined together if they are to accomplish anything, they also do not know that everything in the church goes back to faith and love and that these two must likewise be joined together. Everything in the universe goes back to truth and goodness, and to their being joined together, truths are related to faith, and good actions are related to love. If people do not know that everything in us must, if we are to be truly human, go back to the will and the understanding and the joining together of these two, they can have no knowledge of the fact that everything in the church must go back to faith and love and the joining together of those two if there is to be any church within us. We have two basic faculties, one called understanding and the other called will. Our understanding is designed as a home for truths and therefore the components of our faith, while our will is designed as a home for desires to do good and therefore the components of our love. Thus it follows that love or caring constitutes the church. Faith alone or faith separated from love and caring does not. Faith separated from caring is no faith at all. In the other life this kind of faith perishes. The teachings concerning faith alone are destructive of caring. In the word, people who separate faith from caring are represented by Cain, Ham, Reuben, the firstborn of the Egyptians, and the Philistines. To the extent that caring wanes, the religion of faith alone gains strength. With the passage of time, the church strays away from caring toward faith, and eventually toward faith alone. In the last times of a church there is no faith because there is no caring. People who regard faith alone as ensuring salvation say that it is all right to live an evil life, yet those who devote themselves to leading evil lives actually have no faith, because there is no caring in them. Inwardly, they are consumed with false thoughts caused. This means that goodness cannot be joined them. In the other life they are opposed to what is good and opposed to people who are engaged in doing anything good. People who are simple-hearted know better than the wise what it is to lead a good life and therefore know what caring is, and they cannot comprehend what faith would be apart from that. The goodness of a thing constitutes its underlying reality, and truth constitutes its manifestation. Too, so the truth that belongs to religious faith gets the reality underlying its life from the doing of good in a spirit of caring. So the truth that belongs to religious faith comes to life when we do good actions out of caring, which means that caring is the life within faith. Faith is not alive in us when all we do is know about faith and think about it. Rather, faith comes to life when we will to do, and actively do, what it teaches. Our faith does not join us to the Lord. What joins us to the Lord is living according to faith, which means caring. Worship in a spirit of goodness and caring is true worship. Worship that is devoid of goodness or caring and is inspired only by the truth that belongs to religious faith is a superficial act. Faith alone, separated from caring, is like the light of winter, in which everything in the earth is dormant and nothing is produced. But faith together with caring is like the light of spring and summer, in which everything blooms and bears fruit. In the other life, the light of winter, which is the light of faith separated from caring, turns into deep darkness when light flows in from heaven, and people devoted to that kind of faith then become blind and stupid. People who separate faith from caring are in darkness. They do not know what truth is and are therefore mired in falsities, and these constitute spiritual darkness. They plunge themselves into false convictions and therefore into evil practices. The errors and false convictions into which they plunge themselves. The word is closed to them. They do not pay attention to or even see all the many things the Lord said about love and caring, which include examples. They do not know what goodness is or what heavenly love is or what caring is. Caring, and not faith separated from caring, is what constitutes the church. How good the church would be if caring were seen as first in importance. There would be one church, it would not be divided into many if caring were its essential principle, and it would then not matter how people differed in the teachings of their faith and the forms of their worship. In heaven we are all evaluated on the basis of our caring. No one is evaluated on the basis of faith separated from caring. The Lord's 12 disciples represented all the various forms of faith and caring that together constitute the church, as did the 12 tribes of Israel. Peter, James, and John represented faith, caring, and good actions that come from caring, respectively. Preface to Genesis 18. Peter represented faith, and John represented good actions that come from caring. Preface to Genesis 18. The fact that in the last times of the church there would be no faith in the Lord because there would be no caring is represented by Peter's denying the Lord 3 times before the rooster crowed for the 3rd time. In a symbolic sense, Peter in that passage means faith. Both the crowing of the rooster and twilight in the word mean the last times of the church, and 3 or 3 times means what is completed. Much the same is meant by the Lord's saying to Peter, when Peter saw John following the Lord, "What is that to you, Peter? Follow me, John." Because Peter had said of John, "What about him?" John 21:21, 22. Since John represented good actions that come from caring, he leaned on the Lord's chest. John 13:23, 25, 21:20. All the names of individuals and places in the word symbolize qualities in the abstract. Caring. Heaven is divided into 2 kingdoms, one of which is called the heavenly kingdom and the other the spiritual kingdom. The love that characterizes the heavenly kingdom is love for the Lord and is called heavenly love, and the love that characterizes the spiritual kingdom is caring about one's neighbor and is called spiritual love. People cannot know what is good and what is true unless they know what love for the Lord and caring about our neighbor are, since all goodness comes from love and caring, and all truth comes from goodness. Caring is a result of knowing things that are true, being willing to do what they teach, and being moved by them for their own sake, that is, because they are true. Caring consists of an inner desire to do what truth teaches and not in an outer desire apart from an inner desire. So caring consists of doing useful things because they are useful things to do. The quality of our caring is proportional to the usefulness of what it does. Caring is a spiritual way of life for us. The whole word is a body of teaching focused on love and caring. No one these days knows what caring is. Nevertheless, the light of our reason could tell us that love and caring are what make us human, and that goodness and truth are in harmony, each belonging to the other, so the same holds true for caring and faith. In the highest sense, the Lord is our neighbor because he is to be loved above all else. So everything that comes from him and has him within it is our neighbor, in other words, goodness and truth. The type of neighbor someone is identifiable by the nature of the good that he or she does, and therefore by the Lord's presence in him or her. Every individual and every community, also our country and the church, and in the most universal sense the Lord's kingdom, are our neighbor, and loving our neighbors is doing them good out of a love of what is good, according to the nature of their state. So our neighbor is the well-being of others, for which we are to be concerned. Our neighbor includes civic goodness, too, which is whatever is fair, and moral goodness, which is what is good for our life together in community. Loving our neighbors is not loving the personality they project in public, but loving what motivates them from within, therefore the goodness and truth they have. If we base our love on their public personality and not on what motivates them from within, we will have as much love for evil people as for good people, and we will support both the evil and the good, even though supporting evil people is harming good people, which is not loving our neighbor. Judges who punish the evil in order to correct them and to protect the good from them are loving their neighbor. Loving one's neighbor is doing what is good, fair, and right in every task and in every function. So caring about our neighbor extends to every least thing that we think, intend, and do. Doing what is good and true for the sake of what is good and true is loving our neighbor. People who do this are loving the Lord, who is our neighbor in the highest sense. The life of caring is a life in accord with the Lord's commandments, therefore to live by divine truths is to love the Lord. Genuine caring is not done to get something in return, because it comes from an inner desire to do what is good and therefore from a joy in doing it. If we separate faith from caring, then in the other life we want credit for our faith and for any outwardly good deeds that we have done. The teachings of the ancient church were teachings about how to live our lives, that is, teachings focused on caring. The ancients who were part of the church gave the good actions that embody caring a structure, divided them into categories, and gave each a name, and this was the source of their wisdom. The wisdom and intelligence of people who have led caring lives in this world increase immensely in the other life. The Lord flows with divine truth into caring because he flows into our very life. We are like gardens when caring and faith are joined to each other within us, and like deserts when they are not. The less we care, the less wise we are. If we are not engaged in caring, we are ignorant of divine truths, no matter how wise we may think we are. An angelic life consists of doing good deeds of caring, which are acts of service. Spiritual angels are embodiments of caring. Will and understanding. We have two abilities, one called understanding and the other called will. It is these two abilities that make us truly human. Our nature depends on the nature of these two abilities of ours. These two abilities are also what distinguishes us from animals, because our understanding can be lifted up by the Lord and see divine truths, and our will, too, can be lifted up and perceive divine goodness. And so our partnership with the Lord is made possible by these two abilities that make us who we are, which is not the case with animals. And since we surpass animals in these abilities, we cannot die with respect to our deeper levels, the levels that constitute our spirit, rather, we live to eternity. Everything in the universe goes back to goodness and truth, likewise everything in us goes back to our will and our understanding, because our understanding is the part of us that receives truth and our will is the part of us that receives goodness. Whether you say truth or faith, it amounts to the same thing, because faith and truth are mutually dependent, and whether you say goodness or love, it amounts to the same thing, because love and goodness are mutually dependent. Whatever we believe we call true, and whatever we love we call good. It therefore follows that our understanding is the part of us that can have faith and our will is the part of us that can have love. And since our understanding can accept faith in God and our will can accept love for God, we are capable of being joined to God by faith and love, and anyone who can be joined to God by love and faith cannot die to all eternity. Our will is the true underlying reality of our life because it is the part of us that receives love or what is good, while our understanding is the consequent manifestation of our life because it is the part of us that receives faith or what is true. So the life of our will is our primary life, and the life of our understanding comes from it the way light comes from fire or a flame. Whatever enters both our understanding and our will becomes part of us, but what enters only our understanding does not. Whatever is accepted by our will becomes part of our life. It follows then that we are human because of our will and our consequent understanding. We are all loved and valued by others according to how good our will is and only secondarily how good our understanding is. We are loved and valued if both our intentions and our understanding are good. We are rejected and considered worthless if our understanding is good but our intentions are not. Even after death we retain the nature of our will and our consequent understanding. Those things that are in our understanding but not in our will then vanish because they are not within us. Or to put it another way, after death we retain the nature of our love and the faith that comes from that love, the nature of our goodness and the truth that comes from that goodness, and then anything that is a matter of our faith but not of our love, or of truth in us but not of goodness, vanishes because it is not within us and therefore does not belong to us. We are capable of grasping intellectually things that we would not do willingly, that is, we can understand things that run counter to our love and we have no will to do. Why it is hard for us to tell the difference between thinking and willing. How distorted our state is when our understanding and our will are not acting as one. This is the kind of state we find among hypocrites, con artists, flatterers, and impostors. Every act of will to do what is good and every consequent understanding of what is true comes from the Lord, but this is not the case for an understanding of what is true that is divorced from any act of will to do what is good. Our understanding is what is enlightened by the Lord. Our understanding is enlightened to the extent that our will accepts truth, that is, to the extent that we will ourselves to act in accord with it. Light from heaven gives enlightenment to our understanding just the way light from this world does to our eyesight. The nature of our understanding depends on the nature of the love-based truths from which it is formed. Understanding results from truths that arise from living a good life, not from falsities that arise from living an evil life. Understanding is seeing, on the basis of our experience and information, things that are true, the causes of events, their connections, and how they follow from each other. The faculty of understanding is seeing and perceiving that something is true before considering it proven. It is not the ability to prove anything we choose. Seeing and perceiving whether something is true before considering it proven is possible for us only when we love truth for its own sake, that is, when we are in spiritual light. The light that comes from corroboration is an earthly light that is available to evil people as well. Any dogma, even a false one, can be supported in such a way that it seems to be true.